Again. All right, welcome everybody to the Turbo Makes Games YouTube channel. We're here with Ruben, aka the Game Dev Guru, going to be talking about video game performance in the Unity game engine. So welcome, Ruben. How you doing today?
Thank you. This was a proper introduction now this time. Super happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Johnny. You were the
Definitely.
one to start the conversation, so kudos to you.
Yeah, I think you're doing a bunch of really good stuff with your Unity Performance Task Force. Of course, we'll be talking about that a little bit later in the stream, but if anyone wants to check it out right now, there is a link in the description. Just go to tmg.dev/taskforce, and you can learn a little bit more about that. But anyways, I kind of just wanted to start talking about game performance in general. So first of all, how did you kind of get involved in game performance?
Oh, wow, I didn't expect this question. Let me think. All right, I'm done thinking. Basically, when I started game development quite some time ago, I was started with C++, like many game developers. I actually started with Augur 3D. Not sure if you ever played around with that rendering engine. And, I started probably like any other game developer, just playing around, did some C++ code and such. And then when I started doing this professionally, then I noticed that most colleagues, they they were afraid of touching the area of optimization, right? They were really good at making features and pushing gameplay stuff, right? But I noticed that some of the games were not really properly optimized. And I saw that through user reviews, right? Of course, at some point we got the producers involved and they kind of brought the topic up of performance. And when we start talking about sprints and hey, this is a task where someone has to bring this up to 30 FPS. Back then it was on mobile. Then everyone was in the room like, with the phone. And I don't want to do this. And I was quite innocent, right? So I said, yeah, why not? I will take care of that.
You didn't
And
know
then I
what you were
noticed that
quite
it
getting
was
into yet.
Yeah. Then I noticed that it was harder than it looked, and I spent many weeks just working on performance, like probably 50, 60 hours a week, and that's how I learned the most, honestly. And since then, I actually ended up liking performance optimization, and I noticed that both users demand it and companies actually demand it as well. So it's a win-win for me to keep working on performance optimization.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, game performance is it's such a like necessary thing. Kind of like you were mentioning about seeing the user reviews and stuff like that. I mean, game performance optimization. It's purely like the player's experience. Like if the game is performing poorly, the players are pretty much guaranteed to have a poor performance with your game. And kind of what I was thinking about is like when a game performs poorly, it's really like immersion breaking. Like it kind of breaks the illusion of like them playing a game almost. And then that's when they're more likely to go onto the Steam page or whatever and write some negative reviews about the game, because they're kind of like broken out of that illusion of playing the game. Like if there's like all these performance hitches and textures are popping in and out, like it kind of breaks that illusion.
Yeah, indeed. Actually, remember right now then that when I was a kid, I don't know how old I was. I was probably playing Counter-Strike, like 1.1 or something like this. And it happened to me very often because I had very little money and, I had a very bad computer. And I remember I was pretty good at playing Counter-Strike and multiplayer, of course. But, it happened to me often that I heard some steps and then just, I just sorry, I'm not English. I always forget this word. I just checked behind me just to shoot at the person behind me,
Yeah.
and then for some reason it lagged for 1 second, and the next frame I see is like I'm dead, right?
Yeah.
That happened to me so often. I was
Yeah, and that's
super
that's when you
annoying,
get
right?
like just like really mad at the game. Like that's when like the game feels unfair. It's like, come on.
I've never done a table flip, but I punched the table a few times back then. I didn't know what happened back then, but now I guess that it was the garbage collector kicking in the best possible moment, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now,
exactly.
that's a funny experience to tell, right? The Counter-Strike thing. But now, if you do this in VR, then instead of getting upset, you just get sick, right?
Yeah.
Because missing frames in VR is not pleasant, let's say. Let's put it like that.
Yeah, no, I remember one of the stories you were telling in your game performance task force about how there was some like really poor performance in a VR game, and you had a really bad experience with that, and you said you were sick in bed for a couple of days after that. I'm like, oof.
Yes. Like in the early days of Oculus, sorry, it was a long time ago. It might be not 100%
Yeah, yeah,
accurate.
yeah.
But in the early days of Oculus, there was some issue with the drivers or with the Unity implementation or something like this, where I was just developing a project. And, back then the SDK was pretty garbage, right? I mean, it was a start, right? So things advance over time. So, but there was a bug or something that for some reason, when I put a headset on, the eyes that were being rendered flipped. And
Oh,
then
yeah, that's
for me,
right.
it was
That's
like,
right.
whoa, what's going on? And that's the moment where it took me, I don't know, maybe 2 days or something to fully recover from
Oh my
that trauma.
gosh.
I mean, it's funny now to talk about that, but yeah, I was really afraid of
That's
putting a
wild.
headset after that experience. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no kidding. I'm sure. So yeah, I kind of actually wanted to circle back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier as you're talking about getting into game performance. It sounded like kind of like everyone on the team kind of wanted to avoid, getting into optimizing the performance of the game. Why do you think it is that so many people have kind of this like reluctance to start optimizing their game, and like why does they see it as such like a big, scary, ugly task?
I can think of two reasons. One is that they tried that at the beginning and then realized that it was more complex than it sounded, and then said, no, 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 I don't want this anymore for me. Let the new guy do it. Uh, this is an example, of course. And the second reason might be that, maybe some people don't see fun in doing this, right? They would rather work on AI or work on implementing some game mechanics or even multiplayer, right? Because performance optimization might be a bit more abstract, right? It is at the end of the day just a bunch of numbers that, of course, they translate into a smooth experience and such,
Right,
but it
right.
is not something that is as visible as, I don't know, to put a tank in the
Yeah.
level and drive it, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah. You're not, yeah, adding new tanks or spells or whatever into your game. It's kind of
yeah.
more a lot of like behind the scenes type work, and you don't often see the results of what you're working on. I mean, you do in the game's performing better, but yeah, I could see how people maybe feel like they're not adding new things to the game. But at the same time, I think there is like a type of developer, kind of like yourself, like you mentioned, how after getting into game performance, you really started to like it. I mean, you probably find like a lot of satisfaction of like, getting those frames times down to like as low as you can, right?
Yeah, indeed. Uh, Over time, I think I started to like that a
It's
bit
it's
more.
something that you grew to like, right?
It it is satisfying as well to be able to help other developers, let other developers as well do their features. Only that when they come back to you with a code review, you are able to tell them, be careful with, I don't know, this loop, be careful with this material, be careful with this. And, you do not only talk with programmers, you also get to talk with a lot of artists because, the way that they build models or even with designers, the way that they make scripts, or I don't know which technology they might be using in your case, but you always have some value to give to them, right? So I think you get to speak with a lot of people as well.
Yeah, yeah, totally. And I think as far as like game performance goes, there's so many like subcategories of game performance optimization. I mean, there's like CPU optimizations, GPU optimizations, memory optimizations, and then kind of like I guess your development process optimizations, like figuring out how to increase your iteration time, or decrease your iteration time rather, and so you can develop games actually faster and more effectively.
Yeah, that's right. And when it comes to the professional performance, which is one like it's the first pillar that I talk about in the membership, it is very important as well for a person or a programmer or even just a developer to be performant or to be able to deliver work consistently, right? Without first getting frustrated. That's usually the most important metric, I think. And second, without taking days, right? I remember a colleague of mine who, was really good at making gameplay features, but that person didn't really put a lot of effort in improving his workflows. And Unity, it crashes sometimes, right? And for some reason, back in the days, if it crashed, you had to wait, I don't know, a few hours. So every time it crashed, it was like, okay, I just restarted. I'm going for lunch, and then
Yeah,
okay, I'm
yeah.
going for breakfast, and then I'm going for to the toilet, and then going for a smoke. So that's why I think that the professional performance is also a big part of being a good developer. And studios also ask about these topics quite often. If you ever do an interview, they will ask about things like this, like how do you reduce your iteration times, or how do you manage your versioning control system efficiently?
Yeah,
Do you
yeah.
use shortcuts? Things like this, right?
Yeah, no, that is a really great point because those are the kinds of optimizations that save everyone on the development team time, which in turn saves the company money overall.
Yep, that's indeed the case.
So, what kinds of things can people do to start doing some of these? You call them the pro performance optimizations. Kind of optimizing their workflow. What are some of the kind of the basic things that everyone should start doing as far as those optimizations go?
Oof, there
Like
is
where are
so
where are
much.
the biggest benefits came from? Like what things should people focus on first?
Probably architecture, right? To be able to make features without having to rethink everything every single time. I know, this is probably not talking about performance per se, like in the frame rate, but it is part of a developer's life, right? So if you have to make a feature and then you have to think everything over again, like what kind of architecture to have, that gives you a lot of mental taxation, right? So having a proven set of patterns in mind, that helps, right? I don't say that you should always use patterns, but it is good to have them as tools. Now, there are, of course, more tooling, maybe to learn how to profile in general, to be comfortable with the command line, and probably as well to use tools like the Unity Accelerator, which is, that's a different name for the cache server.
Mm-hmm.
So you just don't have to be waiting all the time. And also things like the domain reloads, so you have to wait a bit less time every time that you hit the play button. All of these things, I think, they are very much critical.
Yeah, yeah, there's definitely kind of a lot of smaller optimizations that people can make. I do think that's interesting that you're saying you kind of brought up like architecture as something that people should kind of focus on to improve their development process a little bit. Just kind of having that kind of general structure of how to structure everything efficiently, and then your code can be maybe a little bit more modular, and it kind of gives you an easy way to add in new features if you need to.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. Are there any specific design patterns that you like and you think are particularly useful for game performance applications, or just
Yeah, actually,
improving people's code base in general?
when I learned the most was when I was working at Vuga, if you know the company. It's actually located here in Berlin, in Germany. Uh, right now, where I am at, right, like the city. When I was working at Vuga, I was working in one of the projects, their Diamond Dash. And then I learned and practiced a lot my design patterns. In fact, I made a blog post about it, which includes topics like the command pattern, the transaction pattern, and dependency injection, a few things like this. And I was able to make a game like super quickly with very little with very few bugs, and in a relatively big team in record time. So I'm pretty proud of that, and I think that everyone should at least consider these patterns in their projects whenever that makes sense. Let me actually look for the blog post architecture.
Yeah, for
Because I
sure.
think it might be a good thing for people. It's a bit dated. I think it's using the old format of the blog when I was hosting this in in WordPress back in
Oh,
the old
nice.
days.
Okay.
And actually, I switched back from WordPress. I quit it because of performance. Actually, it was taking like 4 or 5 seconds every time that you hit.
There you go. You're like,
whatever
I mean,
button.
if you're the game performance guy, you got to have a website that doesn't take like 20 seconds to load a simple blog post, right?
Yeah, I can't stand it, man. I can't. Yeah. So yeah, I just posted it in the chat. Like I
Oh,
said, it's a bit dated.
send it to me on Discord, and then I can post it in the chat. It
Sure.
it might not come through.
So yeah, some of the stuff that I talk about there is the command pattern. I also talk about the command pattern in depth in the membership. The command pattern is all about grouping functionality together that doesn't fit together traditionally from the object-oriented perspective. And then you do this, you create a command, and that can run across different frames, so these can be asynchronous. The cool thing about those is that they let you store state. So you could do something like, if you're talking about a 2D game, you could do something like, hey, invoke the show pop-up command, right? And then you call it, then a new pop-up shows up in your application, which blocks user input from the background and everything. And for example, it does something like ask your name, you press enter, and then the command returns this name. And the cool thing is that you can block the execution of your gameplay workflow if you want until that is done, right? And this is literally 1 or 2 lines, right? It's like, hey, give me the name of, I don't know, if you're playing an arcade game, give me your 3 letters, something like this. And then you wait for that to happen before you continue. I really like that. I talked about that in the performance task force. And yeah, the other things like, dependency injection, single entry point, transactions, polling signals, and additive scenes.
Yeah, no, that's all a lot of great stuff there. And actually, a couple of things that I did want to bring up. I saw some people talking in the chat about version control a little bit. So, what are kind of what things do you look for improving people's workflow when it comes to like version controlling?
I think there it's very important to be comfortable with the command line, right? I have used in the past, of course, CVS, SVN, and such, but of course that's nowadays not the case anymore. What I do use right now is SVN and Perforce, depending on the type of projects. I still have to have a look at Plastic SCM. I'm curious about that, but I think no matter the versioning control system that you use, you need to be super comfortable with the command line, because I found that if you just stick to the UI part, you're gonna end up with a lot of problems that you are not going to be able to solve, right? So you need to learn how to use the command line. You need to learn what each command does. I mean, maybe not all of them, but the 20 most important commands you should actually learn, right? And that was one of the mistakes that I've done early in the days, that I didn't know how to fix. I didn't know the difference between a fetch and a pull, things like this.
Right. And do you have any tips for people who might be working on teams and they kind of want to use version control a little bit better to just kind of like effectively use that between everybody?
Hire someone from DevOps. I would say someone who knows that stuff. If you don't have the budget, of course, that's usually not the case. If you're an indie developer and such, I would say just stick to one specific source control system. I mean, nowadays every type of control system can do the job, and learn it little by little. You have a problem, fine, just read about it, try to understand the commands behind what you're doing. And I use still the UI. Don't take me wrong. I don't do much command line, but when things get ugly and messy, and they do often, be willing
Yes.
to get to the command line. Um, I often get asked between what should I choose? What would I choose between as like Git and Perforce? And normally I don't answer that question actually, but you know, it is not so critical to just choose one of the both, right? Just stick to one and learn that and have fun with that.
Yeah,
If you're on
yeah.
a bigger team, if you're doing a AAA game and such, you probably don't have this question because you probably have someone, an expert, working
Yeah,
on
yeah,
this already.
totally. And yeah, if you ever do get into a mess, then they can kind of untangle that web for you. How about Unity Collab? Do you have any experience with Unity Collab at all?
Well, I didn't hear many good things about that, sadly, but that's what I heard. So I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not saying anything. Okay, don't sue me, Unity, if you're watching this. Um, from my perspective, what I have done is just to learn the basics so that I can help people pass the Unity certificates, right? Because this is one of the things that I do is to help students pass the professional programmer
Okay,
certificate to
nice.
expert programmer. And part of, for example, the professional programmer certification is Unity Collab, right? So, it is nice that they work on something so that designers, artists, and not other people who are not very technical can still use version control. That's cool. But I do not see it very often being used in bigger studios. So I guess that's, there must be a reason behind that. Maybe it changes with Plastic SCM. Have you used it?
No, I haven't. I mostly have just used Git. Um, that's kind of what I learned as I was as learning, programming and stuff like that, and works fine enough for what I need it for. So just been kept using it. Haven't really necessarily had a reason to try anything else out.
Yeah, and that probably goes in line with what diligence, humility, design,
Yeah, I was just
appears,
gonna bring that up.
working
Yeah.
alone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
go
the
ahead.
the yeah the question is serious question. If you work alone and don't really have merge conflicts, isn't UI fine? I've been using UI only for years and haven't had any problems yet.
What's your take, Johnny?
If you have been having any problems, I mean that's fantastic. I mean, yeah, keep using that. I pretty much use the UI. I use Writer for my IDE, and they have the whole like Git UI built in right there. If I ever need to hop over to the command line, it's just integrated right in there. So it's all super easy.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I use the UI, like I said. I didn't want to make the impression that you shouldn't use it. You should probably use it all the time.
Yeah,
Just be
Git
willing
good
to get
command
your
line
hands
only.
dirty. Yeah. But yeah, I think most of the problems come when you are playing with other people, right? When you are, sometimes you need to be careful not to block the work of 300 people, right? So you have to be more careful with the stuff that you're doing. Also, when you are switching branches and switching streams, Perforce, for example, there you might need to be able to be more comfortable with the command line and such. But if you're working by yourself or even in a small team, the UI should be totally fine. And now that you bring up the writer part, yeah, I think it's time for me to learn how to use the Git integration in Writer because I always end up using Tortoise Git.
Okay, okay. Do you use Writer?
Yeah, I use it as a coding environment. But
Nice.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
no,
yeah, a writer's awesome. I mean, talk about the pro performance. That's something that can absolutely make you a more efficient developer.
yeah.
Um,
Maybe you should teach me a lesson, Johnny.
um, shoot, what I was gonna say. I don't remember what I was gonna say. Anyways, go ahead.
Maybe you wanted to say something about CPU, GPU, or memory performance.
I, in fact, did. So yeah, I mean, kind of moving the conversation over to some of the more hardware specific optimizations that people can make. Where often do you see what are some of like the most common mistakes that you see people making? Are they CPU mistakes, GPU mistakes, memory mistakes, or kind of depends on the project?
Mm, I think it depends on the role that you have within the studio or project. Uh, if there is any type of role separation in your case, of course. I have seen artists being not very careful with the materials, for example, where you just export your models as they are, and then you just let Unity create their own materials and all of that, and that explodes the number of tokens, and then people are not happy about that, right? So that's one thing that people do it very often, unless they are very experienced. They just don't care about the materials, and worse, the shaders, right? Hey, do I need this same thing I have here, just a tiny bit brighter? Okay, I will create a new shader for this. This is also a bit typical to see around. And as you might know, changing the shader in runtime several times per frame is going to kill your game performance. So that's also one of the worst things that you can do, to make a lot of shaders, or make or buy, or just download whatever. Because also see that when you download assets from the store and such, they all come with their own crap. Oh, sorry, I said crap. They always come with their own shaders, their own materials, and their own things. And then when you try to integrate thousands assets into your project that come from different authors, that's a party. You're gonna be stuck there for months to fix that thing.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, especially as you're bringing in a bunch of assets, or maybe working with people who don't entirely understand the ramifications of what they're doing. They're like, oh, I just want to add all these cool, awesome particle effects into my game or whatever, and then all of a sudden the game's running at like 3 frames per second, and they're like, oh, what's going on?
It's Unity's fault, and actually sometimes it is, right? Because Unity tells you very often performance by default, but I think that's really hard to achieve. You really need to educate your audience, and well, better. You know this better than me. You're always doing dot stuff, right? So
Yeah.
that might be a bit hard to teach people how to use dots, and if you don't use it, then you don't get performance by default.
Yeah, no, and I was kind of joking in my last video where I said Unity dots is performance by default, so that means if your game's performing poorly, it's your fault.
And talking about the performance mistakes, as a programmer itself, I have seen a lot not being careful with the garbage collector, right? Which might be fine if you're doing something like low-end PC or something, might be okay. But nowadays, with performance becoming more and more important, I think you really need to be careful with that. I think it's very useful to learn how to profile, and then also to have someone who can review your code changes. But I'm aware that if you are one person doing everything in your own game, if you are a musician, if you're a programmer, if you're an artist, if you're a designer, if you're a producer, if you are all of that at the same time, then you don't
Yeah.
have the chance to have that.
Yeah, no, definitely. Jeez, I keep losing my train of thought here. But so what are you mentioned garbage collecting? What are like some of the mistakes that you commonly see that people do that just leads to really poor performance when it comes to garbage collection?
Well, first, I think it is critical that you do it well in VR. If you're doing something in VR, that should be one of the biggest concerns that you have to have when it comes to developing your game or experience. Be careful with the garbage collector. Aim to have, I don't know, like less than 30 bytes of memory allocated per frame. Like 30 bytes. Okay, so that's low. Try that. Things like, just creating classes every time they need it. I think the best thing you can do is to learn about the difference between the value types and the reference types, and when things get allocated on the heap, when things get allocated on the stack. That's important. That's a bit hard at the beginning to understand, but once you know it, then it clicks, and then you are very careful with that. But if you are able to profile your game, if you are able to see the allocations, then you can start asking yourself questions like, why do I have 1 kilobyte allocated here, right? Because every time that you allocate, then you owe some, let's say, money to the garbage collector. At some point, it is going to come back for it, right? And it's going to cost you €2 instead of €1
up, yeah.
or dollars. And then you get people in VR starting to get pale just because of these things. So
that's a funny analogy. I like that a lot. But yeah, I think as you're talking about managing data on the stack and the heap and all that. Because as I was learning programming in college, and we were learning C++, this was like a pretty big topic, is about where data lives and kind of like how it's kind of organized in the system memory and all that. But as you're learning game development, especially like Unity development, you don't really see that a lot, like especially at the lower fundamental levels. And I kind of understand the reason for that is, they want to get people like making games and not have to worry about like super low level memory management. But I mean, do you think there is kind of something to that, maybe where people just don't really understand what they're doing when they start, and then they kind of form some of these maybe bad habits, and then they kind of have to like go back and break those later?
Yeah, I mean, if you are programming something like Microsoft Word or something, maybe you don't need to learn anything about garbage collection or something. That's fine, right? And in fact, people tell you, oh, that's an implementation detail. Don't worry about that. Well, I think you should worry about that if you're doing games. But there's a caveat to what I'm saying. If you're just starting game development, I wouldn't necessarily worry too much about performance. I just learn how to do a game, and then you can optimize it, right? But at some point, you will need to learn performance, right? So what helped me most is to play around with everything, ask myself, what is this thing doing and why is this happening? And, with some time, you learn these things, right? I think if you are doing something serious, if you want to really publish a project, you should totally learn about performance from day one. But if you are just prototyping and such, I wouldn't really worry too much. Just have fun with it, right? It is like going to a game jam that's like, I don't know, 20 hours or something like this, or 24 hours. And yeah, you are doing this variable, you are incrementing it twice instead of incrementing it once. I don't care about it. Just get the thing done. Just ship it.
Make a fun game,
But
yeah.
yeah, exactly. I have seen this in one of the global game jams. But if you really want to ship a project, if you're serious about it, you need to really learn about performance.
Yeah, so you think if you are making a commercial project, you should really have performance like at the top of your mind from day one?
Yeah, for sure. I am working as well as a consultant, so I help studios improve the game performance. Usually it's in terms of VR, or sometimes they are like, I want to reach 120 FPS because they notice that it is important for selling their games based on the reviews that you can see everywhere, like Steam and such. And one of the things that I always notice is that they pay attention to performance when it is already a big problem. So probably one of the most common sentences that I hear when some people come to me for consulting is like, hey, we want to ship the game next week. We have already made arrangements with the publisher and such, but we are at 30 FPS. What do we do? What can you help me? And then
you said they call you wanting to ship next week?
Yeah. That's super. That's super typical, really. Maybe it's 1 week, maybe it's 2 weeks.
Just check the optimize box.
Yeah. Actually, sometimes that works, but not so radically. Like optimizing, leaving something for the end is really the worst, because I have seen
Yeah,
that you
yeah.
need to often to do huge changes in architecture, and
Right.
that's
Yeah, there
just not
could be
possible.
some like core sweeping changes that need to be made, and if you're trying to ship next week, that might not be possible.
Yeah, that's indeed the case.
Dang. All right. Well, I know, I got to bring it up at some point. Obviously, I do a bunch of dots and ECS stuff on this channel, so I kind of wanted to talk to you a little bit about this. You have some experience developing on some dots projects, is that right?
Some, yeah.
Cool, cool. And so, I guess, kind of, what are your general thoughts of it right now? Obviously, it's kind of still in like the preview phases and everything like that. But do you kind of have any like general thoughts on it right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's in the previous state, so one has to consider that. I have used dots for animation, and when I was doing animation, maybe half a year ago or something like this, there is not a lot done on animation, so you might need to redo a lot of things yourself. For example, there is this thing called animation graph, I think it's called, or something like this. There was some editor, like visual editor on the works, but it was, just like one node, right? So I had to make my graph, and then connect the nodes and pass the right data and all of that. It was cool. I think it's a good experience to learn that. But yeah, just be mindful that you might need to do a lot of stuff by yourself, right? And I also did stuff about navigation, about how to just using nav measures. And again, there are many things that are not there for you yet, right? For example, I think local avoidance was not there either, right? So again, I did it. It was a funny experience. I learned a lot, but I think that's cool, man, because that's only going to get better. So at some point, by the time that is ready, if you have learned dots, you are gonna be in a big uh, advantage. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's my thoughts, right?
Yeah, I think so. I feel like, once this actually becomes like a fully released thing and, more companies kind of understand, what it actually means to kind of use like data oriented programming and kind of the performance benefits they can get out of it. I think there's definitely going to be a big need for people who are very familiar with the dots kind of workflow and all that.
Yeah, indeed. And I have seen very good moves in the area of dots, which is, I might be wrong in any of this. You're the expert, you tell me, okay? But in my mind, I know that they were just doing like dot stuff. Like this is only data oriented stuff. You either do dots or you do the old school stuff. And then at some point, they realized that people actually want to work with the editor still, right? And see the stuff happening in the editor. And then they introduced this concept of othering, I think it is, like the othering components, where it just translates stuff from the editor or money behavior stuff into dots.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was amazing, man. I think this move is amazing, to acknowledge that some people, I don't know what some people means, but I guess a big majority, right,
Yeah.
still wants to work within the editor. That's good, man. So
Yeah, no,
I'm
and I'm
very
definitely come from that same place. I've been working in Unity for quite a while now, and so I'm just like super used to the whole editor workflow and all that. And the more kind of editor features that they've been added in are like super helpful. You can literally just now put an attribute on any of your data component classes, and then you can just drag it onto a game object, put the convert to entity script on it, and boom, now you have an entity right away.
That's cool, man. I think I should be watching more often your videos. I think you have really
Hey, you
good
should.
content there. You should watch my videos as well.
Yeah, and we kind of start to talk about some of your videos a little bit. So you, of course, have created this whole Unity game performance task force. So yeah, talk to us a little bit about this.
Yeah. So basically, I have done some courses in the past based on my experience. For example, the course on addressables, when I was working on Star Trek, I realized that I had to shave off about 4 gigabytes of RAM, and I didn't know how to do that. And then I realized, that addressables was probably the most promising package. And then I started doing the course on addressables because I learned a lot, and I think that people had to learn that blah, 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 right? But after some time, I realized that there are so many topics that might be a bit unrelated. Like, I don't know, shadows optimization or AI optimization or draw call optimization or overdraw optimization. I, I couldn't just make, like one course per topic,
Right.
and that would be just probably overkill. So I
Yeah.
was always looking for a way to talk about many things in detail, right? Without, just having to publish one new course every single time. And that's where I slowly came up with the concept of the task force, because this is the perfect method, the perfect way that I have to deliver really good content, in my opinion, of course, about topics that you barely find anywhere, right? And of course, they are always based on my experience. So yeah, there I talk about the things that I found useful in my career, and also things that people request on the back end, right? Because there is like a dashboard where I let people vote on the topics.
Yeah. Yeah.
For example, last time I think it was about animating thousands of characters in a mobile game or something like this, something that's a bit crazy, almost unthinkable of. So I made a video on that as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, because it's kind of the ongoing thing that you can kind of have that interaction and see what people are kind of most interested in at that time, and you can make a dedicated video going like very into detail on that specific topic, which I think is really great about that.
Yeah, actually, I did this from day one because I really wanted people to tell me what actually they wanted. Actually, can probably show the contents of this dashboard.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. I don't know if this is going to break. Hopefully not. Okay.
Yeah, can you still hear
It
me?
work?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're looking good, man.
Perfect. Hope you guys can read this. I don't know. I am always confused with the zoom level, because some people are watching on mobile, some people are watching in
Yeah,
XD, some
yeah.
others are in a 4K monitor, and I was messed up. So hopefully it's readable.
Looks
So
good
yeah,
to me.
here we
So
have like feature requests. I still should put a bit of order here. Like someone talked about how do I optimize a huge level, right?
okay.
I think
Yeah.
this is new. Someone posted it a few days ago. So, when I see these topics, I always try to come up with some ideas. And then at some point, I say, okay, this is it. And then I go for that, right? For example, huge level, I guess that might be about level streaming. And, if you have done some Unreal Engine, you know that there is also level streaming there. I have done Unreal Engine myself quite often. And sometimes you can translate some of the concepts from Unreal Engine to Unity, and even the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. There's a bunch
It's a
of
bit less
course, in
often.
game development, there's a bunch of general things that apply to whatever game engine that you're using. The implementation might not always be exactly the same, but they're. I mean, game
Yep.
engines are there to make games, so.
Then we have about quest optimization, physics optimization, particles for HDRP, light maps, and performance. This was a fun topic. I really like the process of light map baking, because as you might know, in performance, it's really important to bake, bake, and bake. The more things you do in the editor ahead of time, the fewer things you do on the device, right, on the end device. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
that's pretty cool, right? Because doing less things on the end device can mean two things. It can mean A, you improve your performance of your game, you increase your frame rate, or B, maybe you keep the same performance levels that you had before, only that you are now able to improve the quality of your game, or to implement features in your game,
yeah, yeah,
or not to have to drop some other features, right? This is also very common in game development. That
yeah.
you spend weeks working on, I don't know, super cool AI. Like once I was doing what was that? A racing kind of game, and the programming AI for racing, that's super hard, right? And that was super expensive, right? So this is one of the things that you might need to drop if you don't have the budget for that. So making budget is always cool.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think actually one of the most fascinating topics as far as, I mean, really just game development in general, but it certainly relates to performance optimizations, is how, you can like fake a bunch of things in game development, and kind of like figuring out, what things can you kind of get away with faking, so that the user still has like a good and positive experience with your game, and they don't necessarily realize that some things are being faked.
Yeah, faking. Like when I was a kid, I was playing games. I mean, for me, it was magic, right? And
Yeah. Oh
then
yeah.
when I grew up, started, doing game programming, I was like, but this is all fake. You guys have been lying to me when I was a kid, right? Took me a while to accept that almost everything is fake
Yeah.
in game development.
No, that's
And,
what one of my teachers in college, that was like the first thing that he said to us on day one. He's like, this course, I'm not gonna lie, is going to ruin video games for so many of you. You're gonna like see all the things that you've been, thought were real but have been completely faked. So just warning you ahead of time. He's like, I've had a lot of students come up to me in the past saying, hey, after this course, like I realized that everything is like faked and my whole world is now broken. So. But for me personally, I was like, yeah, like bring it on. Like I'm so interested in this. I want to see, like, learn all the like little, weird ways of like, things that you can do to get away with making things look like they're happening that aren't. Like I'm just like super interested in picking that all apart. So, that actually like, really excited me when he was saying that.
Yeah, for example, I remember when I was playing on the Nintendo 64. Not sure, have you ever played Duke Nukem, like 64 edition?
And I haven't played it, but I'm familiar with it.
I remember that in one of the starting scenes, you kill a few pigs and things like that. I mean, it's been a while, maybe it's not totally accurate. And then you went into the toilet as Duke Nukem, and then you saw the reflection of yourself in the mirror. And I was like, wow, I have never seen this in a game. Pretty cool. And then I was thinking about it the other day. As I was talking with a friend, and then it was like, how do you achieve like reflections, right? And one of the things that we came up with is just if you see yourself in a mirror in a first-person shooter, what you can do to do a reflection is just to copy your own character and just do the inverse transforms, right? It is not even a reflection. It might be just the same character.
Yeah.
Duplicated or cloned, and then just put in. This is super fake, man, but it works. So.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Or maybe even in the case of Duke Nukem 64, it was literally just like a JPEG that they.
Yeah, probably. I guess they used sprites for that, because I remember that when enemies turn, it was not pretty smooth.
Yeah,
it
you
was
get
like probably every 45 degrees or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, I had lots of fun, and like Solly says, I enjoy games a bit less since I know that everything is fake. Because I'm not sure if it happens to you, but maybe when you play a game, it's like, oh, that's a cool effect. I wonder how they did it. And then you stop enjoying the game. You start thinking, like, how would I implement this? And like,
Well, that's what. So yeah, actually, I see someone who brought that up in the chat. Zolly says, "I can't enjoy games anymore after knowing it's all fake," and that kind of brings up like one of my favorite quotes of all time. I credit Cliff Blazinski for it because I heard it from him. But you're familiar with the phrase, "If you give a man a fish, he'll have food for a day. You teach a man to fish, and he'll never go hungry for the rest of his life," right?
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to repeat it, but yes, I have heard it.
And then so then the saying that Cliff comes up with is, you give a man a game, he'll have fun for 100 hours. You teach a man to make games, and he'll never play a game again in his life.
It's depressing, right? Could be. I still play. I tend to like more like indie games and such.
Yeah,
So
I'm in the same boat.
looking.
And I'm always like, oh cool, this is like a Unity game, and like again, I'm always interested in kind of like learning how people did things, but I feel like at the same time I can still kind of enjoy the game and appreciate the design decisions that they made and what they were trying to create with their game.
Yeah, totally. I think there is a lot of how to say out of talent out there, right? So no matter the size of the studio, even if you are just doing it by yourself, I have played so many good games. So I would say do not give up. I think you should ship. You should have a responsibility to ship a game because I might want to play your game, right? And if you don't deliver it, I'm not gonna be playing that. I'm gonna be sad. So do not give up.
Yeah, definitely. And let that be a good lesson to everyone out there. Do not give up on the games that you're making. I know, making a game is challenging, but it's super rewarding, and it's great that you can kind of, bring that out to people in the world.
Okay, so coming back to this, just to finish it, so I can stop sharing the screen and I can get back to my castle. Animation of large number of NPCs, light set up. So here, this is a very cool lesson. I think I've delivered half of that because I really had to go in depth about textures. About the
Even
texture import.
the subsections of the subsections, there's like so far deep that you can go into all these performance optimizations. You just have a ton of potential content that you can make. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, for example, I remember that I did just one lesson on texture compression, right?
Yeah.
Where I talk about why you need to take care about the compression, right, of your textures, and how that affects everything, right? Like your loading times, the crash rate of your application, the size of your, let's say, APK, how sharp they look, right? And this can be complex if you don't know how to do this, but I already made the effort for you, right? So for example, I talk about, if you're targeting this platform and then you are aiming for these devices, then you can use this other better compression texture format, for example, ASTC, that gives you better quality for the same price, right? Things like this, right? In fact, I think you still see my screen, right?
I can, yeah.
I prototyped a tool. You guys don't. Oh, weird. I cannot copy that. I was in incognito mode. It's very useful in incognito mode. So I ended up doing a prototype tool in web where I let people compare the quality of different textures. Maybe you didn't know about this, Johnny.
No, I haven't came across this yet.
Myself.
So this is awesome.
This is like left and right. I don't know if in the streaming you see this left and this right, because OBS starts flipping everything around.
Oh wait, yeah.
You get the idea.
And I just realized you were talking before we went live about it being flipped and everything. Your shirt is backwards now, but everything behind you is fine.
That's fine.
Well, anyways,
says, trust me, I am a doctor, like doctor. Anyway, going back to this. So on the left side, you see one texture. On the right one, another texture. It's the same texture, only that we apply different compression algorithms, right?
Yeah,
For example, this one, I can say, hey, I want the original texture uncompressed, right? It cannot get better than that. And then on the right, I can say, let's use, a texture format like, let's look for a crappy one. Let's look for PVRTC RGBA 2 bits. Right? And then you are able to compare them left to right. Oh. But of course, that's hard. That is hard. That's why I made a visual diff that tells you where the differences are.
Oh.
And of course, if you zoom in enough, you guys could do this, right? You can see the pixels. I don't know how the streaming looks like. This is one of the things that I like to do in the task force, is to come up with ideas or tools that let you experiment with this, right? There are some, options. Also, I have some normal maps around, like the original, and then like let's have some fun. PRTC. This is the difference. So everything that is pink is significantly different.
Okay.
It is not just a bit different, it is significantly different. So, and this also lets you find out what is a good trade-off for you. For example, if you go for ace
Yeah, that's
C4,
great.
you're gonna see this is pretty good, right? You have almost no difference. So if you use this in your game, you're going to be in good hands in terms of
that's like such a useful tool because I mean a lot of things when it comes to game performance, it is kind of a trade-off. You're maybe trading a little bit of visual fidelity for saving on memory a little bit, but using some tool like this, you can like actually compare the two side by side and say, is there a perceptible loss in visual quality between these two images, and you can really kind of like dial that in to find out what kinds of things that you can get away with in your game. So I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also one of the things, like, what is crunch compression, right? You are now able to, if you look at the lesson itself, you are able to tell what crunch compression is. But now if you use this, you are also able to tell what the difference means for you, right? For example, you can do this, right? I can say TXT1 with crunch or without crunch, right? You're able to do this, or, even put it like this. You can compare the other ones. You see that crunch compression does a lot to your visual quality. Yeah, so, I mean, that's my focus. I want to be able to tell you this is why you should care about this. And then I also tell you what this thing is, right? And how to get it performing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. That's awesome.
And there are more things here, but
Yeah, that's great. So, and then I guess kind of like talking a little bit about how you have it structured. We kind of mentioned that you have like the 4 pillars. So you have the pro performance, the CPU performance, GPU performance, and memory performance. Oh, and actually, now that you're back in your castle, real quickly, I want to say this. Speaking of faking things, why don't you go ahead and show everyone that little trick that you showed me?
Which one?
Where the little menu pops up on your screen.
The stats window, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know how this is going to end. I haven't tested this.
Boom. Yep.
But
He's been in Unity the whole time, you guys.
Yeah, I can actually change stuff in real time. I mean, I have done this in 10 minutes. Okay, I'm not going to lie. I think it took me 30 minutes. But next time I will get it better, right? I want to do something cool, like probably do a really 3D interactive thing, Let's see. But I think my lighting is a bit broken, right? Anyway.
Yeah. I just thought that was funny that you've set up the little scene in Unity that you're sitting in your throne there.
Yeah, it is pretty cool.
That's
Actually,
awesome.
wanted to put more stuff, like someone fighting on the background or something.
That'd be cool.
But I didn't have enough time for it.
Yeah, so I guess bringing it back to kind of your task force here. So what kinds of things can people expect in all these different modules?
Yeah. So, well, the professional performance, it is always about you becoming a more efficient developer, whatever that means. It can mean a lot of things, right? It can mean being less frustrated at the work that you are doing. It can also mean developing features faster. It can also mean developing more reliable features, right? So that's about that. Of course, that includes iteration times and things like that. In the CPU, it is all about reducing the CPU. By the way, sorry, I forgot about that. The professional performance, I also tell you and teach you how to actually profile, right? How to make a plan for optimization. I talk about the P3 optimization framework just very briefly. I think you said something about that in the last video.
Yeah, I did in the shorts video that I made.
Okay. Yeah. And on the CPU, it is all about how to reduce the CPU overhead of your game so that you can pack more features in. And there we have things like, I made a small list because I tend to forget these things, like how to deal with shaders and shader variants. That's one of the things that people seem not to know much about. So how important it is to have shader variants and the control in your game. Also have to optimize physics, a bit of dots, but I think I can just link to your videos next time. I think they're excellent.
Thank you.
I talk about CPU slicing and animation of thousands of characters, for example. And, we have things like that. On the GPU, there we have a lot of life lessons. I think it's coincidence that most of the life lessons that we do once per month are about the GPU. But there we talk about, for example, last week. No, it was yesterday.
Yeah, I saw it just yesterday. Yeah, you had the one
Yesterday.
on.
I woke up at 3:00 in the morning just to do a live lesson on Shadow. Okay, it was 3:30 in the morning because members voted for that time slot. I said, let's do that. So I took my motorbike at 3:30 just to come here to the office, and then it was cool.
Nice.
It turned out to be a really cool live lesson. I think we spent 1.5 hours on talking about how to optimize shadows. And it was really cool because it was optimization while increasing the quality level of your shadows, which is really important if you're doing a type of game.
Yeah.
We talk about light maps, how to use render dog, and the differences between forward rendering, deferred rendering, overdraw, and all of these important things that let you improve the quality of your scene, right? And the last thing is the memory pillar, which is usually about reducing the memory bandwidth. That is the amount of bytes that you transfer from and to any type of hardware component. Usually it is from the CPU to the GPU, right? And also between the cache levels of the CPU and the cache levels of the GPU and all of this. I'm not going to go in detail in that because it is quite long. I also talk about how to reduce the memory usage of your project so that you reduce the number of crashes that you get in your project. And also memory management. For example, I have... What do you think, Jenny? Should I spoil what I have for next week?
It is for Monday. I think, give people a little hint of what they can see to come. Sure.
All right, so next week, Monday, I will publish a video on addressables, like a super high-level overview on the system, why you need it, what does it mean to you, and how you use it, and how actually to learn how to learn the API actually by debugging and placing breakpoints. I think that's pretty cool. You guys are going to like it.
Oh, that's super interesting. That's something that I'm definitely going to watch. I know the addressable system is really great. I've only looked into it just like a little bit, but that's definitely something that I want to learn some more about.
Actually, I remember that I started the platform, the Game Dev Guru, just by talking about addressables. And I think I made like 10 long posts on addressables every time about a single feature or something like that.
Yeah.
And I posted every week on Reddit, and people were like, "Oh, you are the addressables guy again." I was like, Jesus, I'm trying to help. But yeah, in this video, I'm going to tell people how to use addressables and all.
Actually, just real quickly for people who aren't super familiar with the addressables, can you just give them a quick little overview on that?
Yeah, addressables is. It would be funny if I couldn't know that I have a video coming on Monday about it, and 10 posts about it, and a course actually about addressables. Addressables is a package from Unity. It is official. It is not on preview. That lets you gain control over the management of the memory of your assets, right? Memory on terms of RAM. That means how and when you load things from memory, and also from the asset storage perspective. For example, how do you store assets? If you store them on the package, for example, in APK, or if you want to store them on a CDN, which is like, think of a CDN like an
I
FTP
think it's
server, right?
Content Distribution Network. So what it
Yeah,
stands for.
exactly. So, that might sound a bit abstract, but things get pretty interesting when you know that when you realize that having control over all of that helps you do many things. Okay, and basically it lets you reduce memory usage like tremendously. And just because you reduce memory usage, you also reduce your loading times automatically, and also automatically you reduce the number of crashes that you get because the operating system thinks that you were too greedy, right? uh, that happens quite often. It's like, hey, you want 1 GB more here, let me give you a crash. Happens quite often. And it also helps you as a developer reduce your iteration times, because I remember, I don't know if that's the case anymore, all back in the days, every time that you wanted to publish a new version of your app in the App Store from Apple, they had to review it. That took days, sometimes it took weeks,
Right. Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think sometimes took months. I don't know. I don't want to deal with that. Right? If I want to push an update, like a Christmas update or something like that,
Right.
I don't want to do this 1 month in advance, right?
Yeah, you're
So
basically just adding new, skins and stuff to your game. You're not like, making any big
yeah,
sweeping changes. Like it's just assets, yeah.
even if you just want to add confetti, why do I need to wait 1 month? Maybe I'm exaggerating. I don't know how that works anymore, right? In Apple, but why do I need to wait 1 month to add confetti, right? Things like that where you don't change code, you just change assets, right? So, I could just make a new build, an addressables build, upload the things to the CDN, and that's it. And forget about it. That's it in your device. So that was addressables, right? That was why it is so important for me. It helped me a lot over and over again in every type of project. And that's why, I decided to do so many things about addressables.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's awesome. And then I guess real quickly we can kind of just talk about some of the other bonuses and benefits that people get as part of your Unity task force. I know you have the big checklist of all it's like over 250 items about game performance things that everyone can kind of go through and check things off in their game.
Yeah, not sure if it ever happened to you, but at some point you lose track of everything you need to do in Unity. If you start a new project, just look at my checklist. I have over 250 tips. So it is very likely that you forget something about that.
I'd say.
Probably just my crappy memory. I have no idea. I just want to document things. And I said, hey, if this is useful for me, it might be useful for other people. And that's when I decided to do the checklist, where you can just open the documents or print it. Up to you. There's a printable version. And then if you're facing some type of bottleneck, just go to the section. For example, if you're facing a bottleneck on the physics system, which is under CPU, just go to that section and make sure that you did the tips that appear there. I mean, not always you can do all of them, but at least you are aware, right? If you're aware, then that's key. You need to be aware of these things.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think having those checklists are super handy. That's, something that I've been trying to do a lot more is kind of like make these checklists and systems so that, kind of have the correct process for everything. And, it makes it so you don't miss any steps. And it also saves you a ton of time because you don't have to like be remembering like, oh, what was this? And you're going back and forth between a bunch of things. But if you have a good checklist and you can just, get a nice flow through all that, then that's super helpful.
Yeah, and it helps you with this feeling of did I forget something, right? I hate to have that feeling, right? It's like, did I forget something or not? You don't know. You
Kind
don't
of that
know
like
what you don't
itching
know.
feeling. You're like, I feel like there was something else that I have to look at, but I cannot think of it right now. But use the checklist to keep track of that for you.
Yeah, so I think it is included as a bonus because I think it's been very helpful. People like it. People love it. People keep it around their desk for everything, like even just like a bedtime reading material.
That's hilarious. And then yeah, so and also with that, they do get access to your Discord community. Is that right?
Yeah, I have a private channel for the task force members, and there's some activity there. People posting their problems, and it's like, hey, I need to optimize this, but this is not working. What can I do? But I don't want to restrict it to that, because what I want always to do is to help people increase the performance of their game and increase as well the quality of their game. So some people also post stuff about, hey, I have a problem with for example, yesterday we had the live stream about optimization of shadows,
Right.
and there was one person, I think it was Nicholas, who showed some problems with the shadows, right? It was like there was some gaps in the shadows of his character, right? So we didn't really address it much because we were right already by 1 hour and something. But I told him just post it in the chat and we can help, right? Some people are there, especially people from the virtual reality development on Quest 2. There are a lot of them as well. So we are used to performance optimization there. So if you guys have questions, or just if you want to share your projects and your progress, I think that's pretty cool actually. It is encouraging, right? Because like I said, you don't want to quit game development, but I see many people quitting when they are alone, or at least they feel alone. And I think this aspect of community helps a lot, right? It helps you build and maintain motivation, to be surrounded by people who do the same stuff that you are doing, game
Yeah.
development, right?
Yeah. No, I think kind of having that community is super important, and it's really great that you kind of have that community of people who are all super interested in game performance optimizations, and they like solving those optimization problems, so they're going to be willing to kind of help you take a second look at things.
Yeah, indeed. I honestly don't know what would be of me if I had quit, right? Maybe if I had quit, I would be working somewhere else. Like, I don't know.
In a
I was a
bank.
financial consultant for a few months. Maybe I
Oh
would have
wow,
stayed there. Yeah, in a bank actually.
that's funny.
Yeah. You're from North America, right? You
Yes.
probably don't know Barclays. Here in Europe, it is quite famous. So I was working for Barclays for a few months, and I hated it. I hate it every day of my life. And and then I said, let's do real stuff. And doing things alone sucks, right? That's why I think community
Yeah,
helps a lot.
yeah, totally. That really certainly helps with the extra motivation of getting things done, and yeah.
Talking just as a fun fact or a sad fact, I don't know anymore. I was working for, I think it was Barclays or Bankia, I don't know, another of these banks for this time. I remember some crunch times that were pretty bad. And the company was like, oh, don't worry, we pay you the taxi. Of course they do if you work sometimes like 20 hours or something. I remember a few times that they paid me a taxi to go back to the hotel just to have a shower and then just go back. That's it. I didn't use the hotel, anything else, just for that. And I had to say thank you for paying me the fucking taxi.
Jeez, that's rough. See, crunch is not just a problem in game development. I know people kind of like to talk about crunch a lot, but happens in all kinds of industries.
Yes.
But at least with
Like,
game
if,
development, you hopefully are enjoying yourself and making something that you can be proud of.
yeah. And avoid doing crunch times by becoming a better developer as well, right? Sometimes I think when I look at the past, my career, many times when I had to do crunch times, it is either A, the people managing the project messed up, or B, I didn't know how to do something. I just spent the time myself. Maybe it was volunteer. I was a volunteer. Sorry, I volunteer for that, right? And sometimes if you learn the right techniques, or you learn even just the approach to learn new techniques, you become more efficient at doing this. And the result is that you're going to do less crunch time, right? If you become a better developer as well.
That makes a lot of sense.
Is the reason for crunch in financial industry the same as game industry?
Yeah, I mean, you got to hit your deadlines, right? Isn't that what it mostly comes down to? Is I mean, you often hear about crunch when it comes to there's like maybe like a trade show coming up, or you're going to be releasing a trailer sometime, and there's a bunch of things that you need to do to get it ready before that. And then I would assume in the financial industry there's tax deadlines or whatever, and you gotta hit that.
And never ever they could have foreseen that. Like, I'm prepared for it.
Yeah,
It
it's
is
like
always last minute.
it's like the tax day happens on the same day every year, but you're always crunching at the end.
Magic, it must be.
Well, cool. Well, do you have any other topics that you wanted to talk about at all?
Not really. Did I forget something? It is not that I have a script at all. I think. Look, this is all I had. Wait, let me check if there's something confidential. Yes, there is. Okay.
Yeah, maybe.
There it is. I tear the page off just for you guys. This is all I had. Some examples. I don't know if it's being mirrored. Anyway, some examples on the topics they talk about. That's it.
Nice. Well, yeah, I think we hit a bunch of good topics, and hopefully this was valuable for people. Of course, if you do want to learn more about game performance optimizations, definitely go check out Ruben's game or Unity Performance Task Force. I'll have the link in the description below, but it's just tmg.dev/task force. You can go check it out, learn a little bit more about the task force. And we are offering the first month for $7 here. So I think you're going to really enjoy that.
I mean, what can I say?
I've certainly been enjoying it.
It's great.
I mean, I've certainly been enjoying it. I've been, watching the videos in there and everything, and just learning a bunch of things just from small little tips and tricks to bigger kind of more like architectural type things that I can kind of improve in my project. So I think it's super helpful. It'll definitely help you out if you're a Unity developer, no matter what you're making. If you're making a dots game or just some regular Unity game, there's going to be a ton of good information in there that you can learn from. So would highly recommend it. And then
that sounds. Yep.
Yeah, and just real quick, we can answer this last question. Do you have any ray tracing experience, and do you have any stuff on ray tracing in your performance task force?
I have experience because I collaborate with Unity from time to time. Something I think they call that I am a Unity insider, where I get access to preview stuff that they don't release and things like this.
Right.
I collaborated with them and NVIDIA some time ago on ray tracing. So I did a lot of blog posts in my, I have a lot of blog posts on ray tracing about each of the features that it has, like how to do
RTX.
No, the ray traced ambient occlusion, how to do global illumination,
okay.
how to do reflections. I have a lot of these topics in my blog. I don't have them in the task force, but if it's something that is interesting for you, you get access to these dashboard where you can just submit your idea.
Like you were showing off earlier, you can submit that as a suggested topic.
Yeah, put it there, because when I'm looking for a new topic for a new week or something, I just go through the ideas and pick one.
Awesome. So. That is fantastic. Well, Ruben, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a really great conversation, and thanks everyone for joining in. If you enjoyed this conversation, would really appreciate it if you hit that like button. Of course, go check out Ruben's Unity Performance Task Force. It's in the link below. Also, his Twitter down there, so you can follow him on there. You got any closing words, Ruben?
Yes, don't forget to say that when was the offer expiring? I think that's important.
Oh, yeah. Offer expires tonight at midnight Pacific time.
Oh, tonight? Oh, wow. Well, that's...
I mean, should we give people an extra day? Should we give people an extra day?
All right, guys. I don't know. That's your stuff. I'm cool with everything you want. All right. Yeah, nothing else to say.
Cool.
I was happy to join, so thanks for inviting. It was a lot of fun, actually.
Yeah, had a great time. All right, everyone. Take care. We'll see you in another one.
Bye-bye.